Hello, 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 welcome. Thank you for joining us. Please do remember to share with your networks. We want as many people joining this conversation as possible because we are talking about real stuff, real issues. And do remember to send through your comments so that we are able to see who's joining us. So send your greetings. Thank you. Thank you for coming through. We will start shortly. Let's just wait for a few more people to join us and we will start our conversation. Good afternoon, ladies.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Ponso, unmute yourself.
Hi, Fina. Hi, Candace. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. 2020 and 2021.
The year of
Trending
people,
word.
you're on mute.
Unmute yourself. How are you, beautiful ladies?
Doing
good, excited.
We have a post launch book launch glow.
I can see that, I can see there's something in the waters there. Did you watch with something special, Bonso?
Yeah, no, it's the author glow. It's not me. It's about the fact that I'm an author now. The glow just comes naturally.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So let's get straight into it. Please introduce yourselves. Bonso, you are a journalist. Candace, you are known as the minister, right, of menstruation, and a title that you really uphold with pride. So could you just, maybe one of you, start with telling us who you are, your questions, and somebody is disturbing us there.
Apologies,
So,
that was
all right. So let's start with you, Candace. Tell us about who Candace is, what your passions are, and how you ended up being one of the people who wrote the book that we are going to talk about today.
So thank you for having me today, and thank you to everyone coming in to watch the stream. I'm very excited to really speak about, the journey of menstrual activism, but also just what Flow, the book, means, not only to me, but to all the rest of the world as well. So yeah, I'm Candace Chirwa. I'm a menstrual activist, also known as the Minister of Menstruation. That was a term that was given to my friends through the work that I do with my nonprofit company, Curate, where we do menstrual workshops. And our workshops are really these fun, engaging, dynamic moments where young people can learn about periods in a very, safe space. Because often, I think we can talk about the first time we came and spoke about periods, the first time we heard about periods. It was a scary time. I know for myself, I felt like I was dying for the first time. And so through the literature and the research that I was doing in academic spaces, I just then realized that, menstruation is a natural thing that we have somehow been conditioned to be silenced and ashamed of. So I just used my form of, confidence to just try and get people to speak openly about these matters and issues. And I am a proud feminist. So I will say that I wear that title very proudly. And I'm always keen to engage with people critically and challenge their perceptions. And especially with menstruation, I'm always keen to just see about period myths and see how the world, is changing throughout year to year about how period myths should be removed. So yeah, that's who I am. And I'm really excited to be talking about Flow. I was really honored to be invited and to write and co-author with an amazing group of authors, and just know that in learning that menstruation is a common shared experience, but we all have different things with our periods, but we all have so much to learn as well. So yeah, I'm excited for today. I'm excited to talk about book flow. I'm excited to get people to buy flow. And thank you so much, Pina, for having us here. I'm really excited for the engagement.
I mean, I can see with the smiles, I can hear in the voice, the passion comes through, and it's great to see. Let's go to you, Bonso. Why are you part of the authors? What appealed to you about writing this book? And, who is Bonso Pilani?
Yes. Patricia Pilani is a writer, now author. She's a communications expert, also a lecturer at Wits University in media. And I love writing. And a big part of my life since 2015 is this campaign called #FreeToBleed. And that was my entry into menstrual justice here in South Africa. So in 2015, I won a competition called the Liberty VIP Challenge that was hosted by Liberty Africa, where they were asking young people the question, what would you do, or what would you ask members of parliament for if you had a chance to stand in front of them and ask them a question or ask them for a service? And so the service that I chose was to make pads free for people who menstruate in South Africa. This is a passion of mine because I grew up with my mother, who used to buy pads for our less fortunate relatives, as well as some girls in our neighborhood. And so from a very young age, I was conscientized into this idea that, yes, my parents were able to afford pads for us. I've never had to ask for pads or be without. If I was without a pad, it's because maybe my period came early or something like that, And so I've never been in a position where I did not have the resources to actually have a proper period with the right period products. And so from a very young age, I knew that it is not okay for this to happen, and that it happens more often than not. It was happening in the village that I grew up in. It was happening to family members. It was happening all around me. And that was my introduction into menstrual justice and this idea that not everyone can afford period products. And to be quite honest, it was always shocking to me that before 2019, periods were taxed, period products like pads were taxed like a luxury item, which was ridiculous. And that's why I started the Free to Bleed campaign, asking and lobbying Parliament and policymakers to change this policy.
So would you say, Bonso, we have at least won that battle? Would we say, your campaign has yielded some results?
It has yielded some results, right, Fina? Like I was saying that at the beginning of the campaign, pads were considered luxury items, right? And even though we haven't gotten the win that we all want as menstrual activists, as people who menstruate, as feminists, as activists in this country, which is for pads to be free for any and everyone who needs them. We, in 2018, during the midterm budget speech, the former finance minister, Tito Mboweni, announced that the zero rating of pads, and by zero rating, we mean the removal of the value-added tax or VAT on disposable pads. So the usual pads that you can buy in any shop to use that you throw away, that's the only period product that has no tax VAT on it. So that's a win. That's a policy win. It's not the ultimate win, but this is a marathon, and slowly but surely we're hoping, even through conscientizing people and society through this book on the importance of menstruation. We've been asked, why menstruation? Why do you think this is an issue that deserves for you to even write a whole book? Really? A whole book with so many different authors on it, Nochal. It's not like one person wrote the book, but so many of us wrote it. And this is because we need the policy win, which is to see pads free, to see a stigma-free world when it comes to menstruation, where girls in school don't have to whisper to one another, yo, can I have a pad? Get my pad. And then you put it in your shirt or in your pullover, or the shame that is attached to the period. We need that to end. And we're hoping that flow also is part of the journey to the big win, which is free pads.
Yeah. And we need to acknowledge that, The patriarchal system is in every area of women's lives, So we are taxed for natural occurrence. I mean, we don't apply. We don't put in an application to say, I want, to have periods or to menstruate when others don't apply. It's something that happens naturally, and that you are taxed for having a natural occurrence is some way where some of the ways that patriarchy actually oppresses us as women, because condoms are given for free. And we know for a long time in our country, we were promoting more the male condom than we were promoting the female condom. So
Yes,
in a way, again, we are looking at a system that continues, to sideline women, but also continues to put men ahead, because whatever that happens to us as women is something that doesn't, it's actually even, it doesn't matter, but also they now use religion to shame us, because I'm sure, Ponzo, you would have engaged with people who tell you that, as a woman, when it's culturally, when we look at women culturally or through the eye of religion, when you menstruate, you are dirty, you are not supposed to touch anything, you are not supposed to cook, you are not supposed to touch a man's thing, because you will make those things dirty. Did you dirty, right? So I don't know, have you found that to be what is out there? What have you been hearing about menstruation from a cultural, religious perspective, from old people's perspective, if I'm allowed to say old people?
Yes, that's a very brilliant question. We have a chapter in the book, Fina, that is dedicated to talking about spiritual and cultural perceptions of menstruation, right? And so one of the things is we particularly focused on the main, I don't want to say main, but the most common religions, which is Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Right. And we also looked at, because this is Africa, we also looked at African spirituality and to see what different religions say. And another thing that's coming later is we're going to have a podcast where we discuss the issues in the book in more details with the experts that we interviewed in the book. And we talked to a rabbi, a woman rabbi. We talked to a Muslim feminist. We talked to a Christian feminist. We talked to also a Sangoma who identifies as a feminist and someone with progressive politics. And all of them link to this, that it is patriarchy that has made the conversation around menstruation dirty. That when we think about it from a religious point of view or cultural point of view or spiritual point of view, whichever word that you want to use, that this was not the norm. The ways in which we have adopted the dirtiness is that as a result of patriarchal influences on religion, right? So for instance, one that I really, I can't keep going, I keep going on about is around, from a cultural point of view, particularly, the Sangoma we spoke to was saying that, yes, you are meant to rest. If you are itwasana, somebody who's being initiated into being a sangoma, or if as a woman, that actually when you're in your period, it's considered that you are vibrating at a higher frequency, that you are more dangerous, that you are at your highest spiritual level. And sometimes when they put you aside, it's so that, you're not allowed to touch things like muti, and the medicine that's being used. And that's not because you're dirty, but it's because you are vibrating at such a high spiritual frequency that you are the most powerful that you can be. And we know even in the Bible, one of my favorite Christian songs is like the woman with the issue of blood. We know what Jesus said. Jesus, as people were casting this woman away, Jesus brought her. And she had it wasn't just menstruation, she was sick because her bleeding was nonstop. And so we see that. And the Muslim feminist as well talks about how, yes, religion, the Muslim or Islam religion in general takes it as a bad thing. But when we look at when she thinks through it from a feminist lens and her religion and spirituality, the reason that you don't fast during Ramadan as a menstruating person is because you need to keep your spiritual strength. And for her spirituality, her period is linked directly to her spirituality, and that these are the same things. And so we see these things existing, and we really need to understand that it is patriarchy that has resulted in some of the ways in which we view menstruation as this dirty thing, and not necessarily from that it is scripture or different religions that say these things.
Yeah, very true. And I think women need to know that we need to embrace and love our periods. You know, we need to see that as something that is uniquely women, and we cannot compete with. That's one area where we don't compete with men. You know, we don't compete with them, you know, about our periods that make us these special beings, as you say, Bonso. But I think the stigma that is attached to having periods. And Candice, I want us to speak about how do we begin to destigmatize, you know, periods, and why is it important for us to do that?
I think, you know, it's so interesting that oftentimes we're always asked, like, you know, when we're talking about how do we remove period stigma, what is like the 1, 2, 3? And I think it starts with you first. You have to remove any form of stigma that you have towards periods. So if you feel that you feel a little bit shy when it comes to talking about topics of period pain, or you feel a little bit unsure about things when it comes to different period conditions that exist, then it's best that you know, equip yourself with that education and information, so that if you are going to embark on the journey of educating other people and changing perspectives, that you're coming from an objective point of view, but also sort of normalizing the conversations. And I always just tell people that it's as simple as asking someone, like, why is it that society views periods so negatively? And just seeing what their responses would be. And it's also just as important as, like, literally asking them, like, what is your viewpoint of the access to period products in this country? Or what do you think about a tampon? It's just asking questions just to gauge how people feel about periods. And from the responses, you'll be able to see whether this person is willing to have a conversation about periods, or whether this person is just like, I'm so frightened, I don't want to talk about period blood. And then knowing how to navigate how you have that conversation. But when Curate hosts our menstruation workshops, and in particular for young people, what we find oftentimes is that there's this eagerness that young people want to learn. They especially want to learn about something that impacts them directly. It's just somehow society has told them that, you know, when you're menstruating, you can't tell anyone about it. You need to isolate yourself. No one should know. No one should see your pad. No one should see anything. So keep it to yourself. So it's very difficult coming into spaces as a menstrual activist, then spending an hour with young people and saying, we're going to talk about periods. And the first look is like, oh my gosh, not this thing that I was told not to speak about. And I think it's with the approach that we come in, because we don't come in with let's talk about periods. A period is this every 3 to 7 days. No, we come in with an approach of, we're going to learn, we're going to have fun. This is your bodies. You need to know how to say the word vagina confidently. We do different fun activities that just really equips people with the critical thinking that they need to understand a subjective thing that is their periods. So I do think what is important is that you have to read first. You have to equip yourself with that information, and then ask the people in your life, your close friends, your close family, like, what is their viewpoint about periods? What do they think about the state of periods in this country? And then navigate those conversations and trying to do more in your own way. Because I think as individuals, we all do have some form of social responsibility in how we end period stigma. And even if it is you just openly saying, I am a period positive person, or it's you simply just having Flow, the book about menstruation, on your table so that you can allow other people to openly have conversations about periods, then we are establishing a period positive world, and we're stepping closer to in the right direction. I think my whole goal for my life is to ensure that the next set of menstruators who come after me will not have to feel like they're dying for the first time, like I did when I first started menstruating. And so I think it's really critical that we understand that we do have some form of power, even if it's just providing sanitary pads in our workplace, or even if it's just donating 50 Rand every month to an organization. We do have some power in changing the world of a menstruator's life. So yeah, I think that answers the question. I do have to say though that the responsibility shouldn't only just be on, it shouldn't be a gendered thing as well. I do think that in particular we need to also ask cisgendered men to take the call on talking about periods. You know, I find it so interesting how I have conversations with my male friends and they never like, oh yeah, you know, my girl's menstruating and I just chose to do nothing. No, men have a responsibility. If you are dating someone who is a menstruator, please take care of them. Ask them what they need. Ask what you can do to help. Provide sanitary products, give them chocolates, give them gifts. I don't know, whatever they need, you have a responsibility because at the end of the day, you are surrounded by menstruators and you are possibly going to be a future dad, so you probably need to know what menstruation is. Therefore it's important that men are as involved in the work of menstrual activism and that we don't gender this thing, because again, menstruation is everyone's conversation and not everyone who menstruates is a woman and a girl, and menstruators is something that we need to be also having a conversation about, being inclusive within this conversation of menstrual activism. So yeah, I always end it off with menstruation is everyone's conversation.
Yeah, and maybe let's expand a bit on what you were saying. Everyone who menstruates is not necessarily a girl, right? Tell us a bit about that and how, we can start being inclusive, as you are saying, advocating for inclusivity. How do we begin to do that? But expand on what you were saying with that statement.
Yeah, I think I think oftentimes when we talk about menstruation, we've always seen it from a perspective of it's a girl and woman's issue. But through work and through activism and through conversations within the LGBTQIA community, there are people who menstruate that don't identify as women and girls, and there are trans people who do menstruate. And it's important to understand that by being exclusionary, by just saying menstruation is a woman and girls issue, you are being exclusionary in saying that trans people, intersex people, and those who identify can't go and have access to a doctor or gynecologist. You're sort of implanting the idea that if a trans person had to see a doctor and say, I'm having period pain issues, chances are the doctor will be thinking that, well, menstruation is a woman's issue. Why are you here? You shouldn't be here. So I think it is a conversation that is very vital, and it's something that we highlighted very importantly in the book, because we just said that it was really important that we don't just highlight it as a woman and girls issue, but it actually has to be everyone's issue, and that we are inclusive in the way we have these conversations. And in bringing in trans doctors like Dr. Anastasia, who talks about these things, is really important so that people gain the awareness. But also at the same time, being the Minister of Menstruation, and I always start off my addresses with fellow menstruators, and being attacked by trans exclusionary radical feminists who say, but menstruation is a woman's issue, why are you trying to erase us? It just shows that there's more education that needs to be had. And I definitely think that there needs to be more voices, in particular from menstruators themselves, who provide, some form of detailing as to this is how I menstruate, this is me, this is who I am. Because oftentimes what happens is that people don't believe. People genuinely don't believe. But then again, people also don't want to be in the position to show and tell. It's just a thing of just believe that there are menstruators who do bleed, and that we just need to be supportive and inclusive. So more than anything, I know that I can't speak for all menstruators, because again, my period is different to others. But I do know that in my languaging that I use, that I am very inclusive, and that I try to say menstruators or people who menstruate, just to ensure that future doctors or any doctors know that trans people can menstruate, intersex people can menstruate, and they should be afforded the same healthcare as well.
Okay, so the correct terminology is to call everyone who menstruates menstruators and not say women. So we are shifting that focus from just it being about women, but it being about everyone who menstruates. So that's something that we take as a lesson today. Fellow menstruators, that's the language we need to start using. And yes. I hope I get it right. I'm learning language, in these different conversations, you get to understand the language that is acceptable, because our society has normalized exclusion, and we struggle with being inclusive, and we struggle with discrimination, even when we don't intend to, because that I didn't intend to do it. When it's done, it's still, offensive. It's still painful for the person at the receiving end, even if maybe it was pure ignorance on my side of not knowing, the language and the terminology. So thank you for that. And earlier I mentioned old people, not because I of ageism, but I was reflecting on my own experience when I started with my periods. I was staying with my grandmother. So I stayed between my mom's place, my parents' place, and my grandmother's place. So when I started my periods, I was staying with my grandmother, and it was a girl at school had started her periods before me. So my experience was through her experience. She had started her period at school, and she was a laughing stock because she stood up and there was blood all over, her school dress. And people were laughing and everything. So when you get home, you tell your story. And my grandmother thought it was an education moment, right? But now she was putting fear in me. She's playing with boys. When you see that happening, it means she has been playing with boys, and you must stay away from boys. So you can understand when you are told periods are as a result of you playing with boys. When yours come, you won't tell, because you don't want to be accused of playing with boys. And we understood what playing with boys meant. I mean, kids now, you can't say that's the language you can't use right now. You can't be saying don't sleep with boys. They understand very clearly that having sex is not sleeping. It's having sex. You need to be explicit when you now describe things. But a lot of girls, I want to believe, Bonso, this is how they are introduced to menstruation. The conversations that are held around menstruation are not necessarily factual. They come from a position of trying to make sure that you don't fall pregnant, or to avoid you now being intimate with boys because it will result in pregnancy. The conversations we are having, as parents with our children become very critical. And calling a spade becomes even more critical, isn't it? When it comes to menstruation and periods.
Very true, Fina. We need to have conversations where we're not scaring menstruators and first-time menstruators. Yes, when you menstruate for the first time, that's the first that you are more likely to become fertile from there. But that shouldn't only be the conversation we're having. And, this is why Candace's workshops are so important, where they teach young people to embrace their periods, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It is a beautiful thing because it's growth as a person. And I think it's important that it's not just the conversation is not just about what the fact that you may fall pregnant now, or that, like all the negative stuff. It really should be, you can take care of yourself. It should also be helpful information on what to do, what products are available for you, how to use a tampon, because perhaps maybe you like swimming or you play sports at school and now you don't want to miss sports because you're menstruating. The conversation should be informative and empowering, and not just about really saying don't fall pregnant because you're still a student and stuff like that. I think sometimes our sex education or sexuality education is very risk orientated. So we do not embrace the truth from just talking about things. And we have a section or many sections in the book that this book is for, like we said, the flow is for people, young people who may be starting to menstruate, but it's also for parents. We have parents who contributed to the book. Karen Janes, who was supposed to join us on this conversation today, but couldn't because of other commitments that came up last minute. She talks about her own experience as a parent, having these conversations and how to have these conversations. We also have a psychologist, Claire Fourie, who also contributed into the book, who talks about how to navigate these conversations with young people, with your children, with your nieces, your nephews, your younger siblings, and everyone. It's very important that we have these conversations in a way that don't shame, in a way that empowers and in a way that leaves young people feeling like they know what's happening and they're not just scared. I think back to my first period talk as you were reflecting on yours, and my mother, God bless her, she also said, hey, don't play with boys. It's not the time now. And I would have really loved for it to be more than that. And this is why we've created Flow, to make it easier for parents, because it's hard to practice something that you may have not experienced, but now we understand that it's time for us to break the generational curses or the generational habits that we've built up. And so use Flow to help create a better relationship that people have with their parents, and that your children, nieces, nephews, and other young people in your lives, and even if you're in your 30s, your 20s, it's not too late to have a better relationship with your period.
Yeah. And Nelisiwe, I think, is agreeing with what I was saying. She's saying parenting programs are critical, as some parents in this day and age believe that if a young girl starts her period, it also means that she's sexually active and sleeping around. So we leave a lot of young women traumatized, or menstruators. Now that I know, we leave a lot of menstruators traumatized about this in their own homes. And if your home is a space where we are traumatizing you, imagine what society will be doing out there, if you can't find safety in your home. And maybe we need to then discuss, is there a role for teachers? Because I know some parents are still not comfortable having conversations. Should we be leaving these conversations around your period, your developmental stages as you go through all the body changes, as a young boy, a young girl, as a gender non-conforming person, when you go through all these developmental developments in your body, who should be having these conversations with you? Should we leave that to the teachers because teaching is about that? Or should we be saying, nope, parents have a role? Any one of you can answer this one and maybe motivate why, you are saying these conversations should be held, whatever platform you choose as the platform where these conversations should be held.
Candace, I think you would give a great answer, because especially because of your workshops, you spend a lot of time speaking to young people about this, and you also know the needs that they have or who they want to have that conversation with.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely young. The young people want to have conversations with their parents. They want to rely on their parents, because at the end of the day, it was their parents that brought them up, raised them, and they were able to rely on them. And I also think, besides just parents, but also family members, like your trusted aunts, your uncles, your guardians, your grandparents. I think a lot of the time, the young people that I engage with are always just relying on what mom has said or what grandmother has said, which shows that there needs to be more work, like Nelisiwe said, in terms of parenting programs, so parents have the right form of information. Because what often happens is that I see that parents have this form of fear where they think that if they talk about menstruation, they're going to talk about sex, and therefore their children are just going to be out in the streets doing the most. And that's not the case. I think that from the point of view that we come from in Curate, we say that it's better that we equip young people with that critical information so that they can make the right and socially responsible choices from a point of information rather than a point of misinformation or the unknown. Because oftentimes what happens is that young people will say, okay, because I haven't been spoken to about sex, or haven't been spoken to about, how to use condoms or birth control, I'm just going to just do it, experiment, and then teenage pregnancy happens. Because young people are not having conversations with their parents or their teachers about different period products that exist, what happens is that they know that if they don't have access to any forms of actual period products, they'll use unhygienic materials so that they can continue about their daily activities. And that is a risk factor. So we need to be having more critical conversations, and it can be from a very child-friendly perspective. I mean, on Curate, we actually create content, like animated content, for young people to engage themselves, but also for parents to engage as well, so that if they want to understand periods without having to talk about what happens when the egg isn't fertilized, there is that information accessible. But I also do think that parents just need to get over that fear and rather empower and enable themselves with critical information to say that I know what's best in terms of giving my child the critical information so that they can make the choices for themselves. We're not saying you need to control and manipulate your child. We're not saying they must only wear the sanitary pads for the rest of their life, but give them the agency to know what different period products exist. Give them the agency to talk openly about periods. Give them the agency and the space to express the period symptoms they're going through. It's all about creating that safe environment. But it also speaks to teachers as well, in particular male teachers, because what often happens in the workshops we host is that we'll come in, we'll have the young people for an hour, they'll be empowered, but then after the workshop, they come to us and they'll say, so if I'm writing a test and I have the male teacher, what do I say to him so that I can go and get a pad from the office? Because although they're confident to themselves, they are not sure how the male teacher will react if they said, teacher, I'm on my period, what must I do? And often what usually happens is after our workshops, we have a one-to-one with the teachers to say, look, often if the menstruators don't feel comfortable and say they are on their period, but they say they have a personal emergency, don't inquire, don't probe. Usually it means that they are menstruating or they do actually have an emergency, and rather let them go to the reception so that they can have someone attend to their issues. But at the same time, what we also call on male teachers in particular to do is to understand what period symptoms are, to understand that period cramps are real, to understand that, in particular, menstruators will have issues of brain fog. So brain fog is when you forget. Your brain is foggy, you can't remember anything, you're struggling to concentrate, and then on top of that, you have cramps, then you have nausea, then you have bloatedness. It's a lot that menstruators go through. And you now imagine you're expected to concentrate in class. So oftentimes, male teachers have to be very sensitive towards this and in understanding that these are hormonal fluctuations and that menstruators have no control over these things. And they should be willing to be able to assist and help and say, if you are having headaches or if you are having cramps, go to the reception, or I have medication. I think it's establishing that safe environment first. And I do call upon male teachers to read Flow the book, and I do call upon them to have Flow the book on their shelves so that young menstruators know that this teacher is really cool and I can talk to him about any specific issue regarding menstruation and puberty, and that they're equipped with that information. So yeah, I think it's a lot of work that we always have to do in particular with the workshops, because we can spend an hour and these menstruators are able to say vagina, vagina, vagina. They can twirl tampons, they can dance. But then the moment they leave that safe space, they now have to face reality and saying, okay, I have the confidence for myself, but I'm scared as to how society will react. So we usually do a one-on-one with teachers to say, we've just spent an hour with these children about periods. What do you know about periods? And how do we engage further in terms of how you can establish a period positive environment in classrooms? And it really is just about removing that fear. Because at the end of the day, nothing is going to happen to you. It's not like a thunder strike is going to hit you when you mention the word vagina or hit you when you mention the word sanitary pad. It really is just about enabling yourself with that information and critically engaging to understand what periods actually are rather than spreading misinformation.
Yeah. And there's somebody who's saying to you there, this is a great discussion indeed, but the question is, at what age should parents start talking to menstruators about menstruation, putting in mind the role being played by the kind of foods these menstruators eat? Is there a link between the kind of food that they eat and the impact on maybe the pains or the flow?
So a lot of studies have been showing that menstruators can start at the age of 8, and there is a link to food in terms of genetically modified food and the hormones and how that sort of increases the amount of hormones a menstruator has in starting the puberty process. So I would say that you start having those conversations at the age of 8. Usually the average age when one starts menstruating is from 12 to 13, but you rather would start at the age of 8. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the full conversation about every month the ovary is released and then it travels down the fallopian tube, and then you don't have to have that conversation. You can simply just start off with saying, if for instance, even if your boy child asks, I see mommy carrying the tampons, or I see that, like, what is that? You openly say, this is a sanitary product that collects blood every month. And you started off with that. And if they ask a question, what blood, you answer sensitively and in a respectful way, not to say, the blood's disgusting. No, you say this is menstrual blood that happens every month. It's natural, and it happens to half the population, and that's how you start the conversation. And then if they want to inquire more, then I also implore you to look at, there are a lot of YouTube videos for young children in understanding what periods are and explaining periods in a very fun way. There's actually even a song called Menstruation Station, where these young kids are traveling on a train, and it shows you different PMSs, so there's different content out there for you to engage in with your child. And I do think it is important that you establish that environment first, and you never shut down their questions. So if they do ask to say, I'm watching this TV commercial, why is the blood blue? You'll actually say, no, the blood's actually red, and this comes from the vagina, and it's perfectly normal, it's perfectly healthy, and it's safe. That I think using those keywords are important, but start from the age of 8. As research shows, menstruators do start. The youngest is 8 years old. Yeah.
I'm laughing because you keep saying the word vagina, and I know if I'm around children who in their homes, when they say vagina, they say, hey, waruhana wena, because our societies don't want us to call our body parts with their real names. We give them fancy names, and that also creates a problem. But we will get to that discussion another time. Also earlier you spoke about the campaign that you are doing, and I think confidence is, supporting what you are saying about why we need to educate even the different products that can be used. She's saying menstruation and how to use sanitary pads should be part of girl-child curriculum at school in case parents are not comfortable to do so. The Department of Health school health program should come in and ensure that girls are given sessions on this topic. I think there's lots of programs done in schools. There's LO, Our Soul Buddies, by the way, Candice also targets 8-year-olds because, like you who've done the research, we understand that you need to start as early as that to have these conversations, and it's important. But I'm coming to you, Ponto, because there's a question that was asked here around how would young women in different spaces help drive policy change in making sure that pads are provided for free. Because one of the big issues around sexual reproductive health is the issue of access to commodities in the clinic, access because of socioeconomic status of families. And I believe that's why you started the campaign. There are young women who are not able to go to school when they are on their periods because they don't have the pads. And I see a lot of people who do drives, they collect pads, and some maybe don't even know the reason why they do it. It's a trendy thing to do, but there is value in doing that. So how do we get young people to help drive change, as Nompilele is asking, in making sure that pads are provided for free? What campaign should we be having as for today? When we leave this conversation, what campaign are we driving?
Local government elections are coming up, Fina, and I think, we need to implore from a school level, we need to implore parents right now. So it's not just young women. We really need to go to our local leaders, lobby them, to lobby the provincial, to lobby the national, where if enough people complain about this problem, then it will be taken seriously. We can't have, it's great that there are a lot of different CSI projects from various organizations, particularly in the private sector. In schools, there are different shops where if you donate 10 Rand, a box of pads goes to someone who needs it. And those are really great initiatives, and we applaud everyone who takes part in them. But I think it's really, really important that we have political will for this issue. We know, just speaking, yes, I've said that the big policy win was the VAT related win. However, because of the campaign and many other, the list is endless of various organizations that have been working on the very same issue. The Department of Women, women, children, youth, and people with disabilities started this based on the policy brief and other lobbying and civil society sector push called Sanitary Dignity Program. So about 2 years ago, that Sanitary Dignity Program piloted in 3 provinces where about 159 million rands was divided in all provinces so that we try this thing of giving out pads in schools, by government. And even though there have been hiccups, I follow the issue quite closely, even when there are meetings at the portfolio committee meetings. There's still a lot of hiccups on the way. And the thing is, when we are seeing progress, we are seeing that the Department of Women, the Department of Social Development, Education and Health are working together to try and make this policy win a reality. But there's a lot of inconsistencies. I also think COVID-19 has to do with a lot of the delays in really implementing this program in a way that it runs smoothly and there are no hiccups. But these are some of the ways that, you could ask. If you're a young person in your school, you can go and ask, ma'am, your principal, your HOD, ma'am, sir, are we registered for the Sanitary Dignity Program? Does the Department of Women know that we're one of the schools that need these products? Most of the schools that are targeted by this program called the Sanitary Dignity Program is those schools are considered the quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools. These are the most impoverished schools in South Africa. They are in some of the most impoverished communities. So they are considered, the no-fee schools as well. So that's where the policy or the program is targeted. However, we know that particularly now with COVID-19, the unemployment statistics came out yesterday. We saw those numbers. Those numbers are horrific. They're scary. And that means even people or families who were insulated by someone working, COVID may have changed that situation. So we need to really rethink, does this program only run in poor schools or quintile 1, 2, 3 no-fee schools? Or does this program also need to run within communities where we know that COVID has impacted so many people? We also have students who they're brilliant and learners who are brilliant, and they get sponsorship to go to very expensive private schools, but there's no money, it's their school fees or it's the academic money that is covered by their scholarships or their bursaries or whatever. But what about things at home? Or they don't have, and so even this idea that the Sanitary Dignity Program is only for certain schools, we know that's where the majority of people are struggling. But we have homeless people. We have people who are living in the streets. We have people who are in homes. We have what happens to people who menstruate that are not within the schooling system at university level, people who go to get contraceptives in clinics. And so it needs to expand beyond the schools. Yes, the majority of people who need the service is in schools, or who need these resources is in schools, but it does not end in schools. And so we need to see the next step of this program. We need to see, what is the rollout going to look like in public clinics? What is the rollout going to look like for women who are collecting grants for their children or the people that they're guardians for? We really need to see it expand beyond schools, because although it is important in schools, it does not only affect menstruation or period poverty, as we call it, which is the lack of period products for your for your period, is called period poverty. Period poverty is not only limited to people in schools, and we really need to see this program expand. So I really think we need to lobby. We need to ask the political parties that we want to vote for. At the last general elections, I actually, in partnership with Soul City, when I was still at Health E-News, I wrote this article called How to Make a Feminist Vote. These are some of the questions, and we really need to update that and update that article to include things like sanitary products. We need to ask our political parties that want a vote, now as we're going into local government elections, that what are you saying about periods? How are you going to make sure that period products get to women or people who menstruate who are street based or who do not have a home or shelter? How are you going to get into shelters? What are the ways in which you're thinking around non-school involved people? Because I think even in the pad drives, there's a lot of focus on schools, which is great. We love it. We welcome it. But we have left a big population out of people who menstruate, who do not have resources, who are outside of the schooling system.
Yeah, true. And I like that we are saying we need to make sure that the political system understands the women issues, because they need to respond and meet us at our need, right? We can't just vote for the sake of a pretty face behind the ballot box. Gone are those days where we vote on the basis of, ANC took us out of whatever, apartheid, this other party did this, but we need to understand what is the agenda right now. What are they responding to right now? History is history. We can't vote based on 25 years ago. Right now, there are issues that we need clarity on in terms of the position that political parties are taking, issues that affect women, at their most need. So before we close, I want you to, this is the book that we are talking about for those who have not seen the copy. This is the book, and you can see it's flowing, it's red. But maybe just take us through the different chapters of the book. I know you've been mentioning, and there are different sections. It has 3 sections. So there's section 1 that speaks about the physical, section 2 speaks about the psychological, and then section 3 about the political. So just take us through some of the issues that you unpack. For example, in the political, we talk about put a cap in it, the politics of period products. And in chapter 9, which is in section 2, we talk about a stressful period, and menstruating with added challenges, the weight of it all. And then we also talk about, menstruation and gender, which is what you touched on earlier, around menstruators not necessarily being women, but us being inclusive even in the language. And the other one is, let's talk more about this whole puberty thing, which is very interesting, because that's a period where we get frustrated with our children, they get frustrated with us. If you raise a teenager, you are like all the time, what's wrong with you? And they're like, what's wrong with you? So tell us about the inspiration behind all these chapters and what you want us to take out of all the chapters that you've unpacked in this book.
Yeah, I think, what I think about it, I think the whole writing process has been so easy because we were just able to virtually meet and just say, I think we need to cover this. I think we need to cover this. And then as we started writing, we're like, no, we're missing out on this. We're missing out on this. I do recall how we were always just on alignment with saying that our language is that we're always going to say people who menstruate or menstruators. And it was been such an easy process in writing. And I think dividing the book into 3 parts makes it easier as an index and as a guide for those who want to really just understand what periods are. You can focus on section 1. And what I love about section 1 is that there's also a chapter that asks you what is normal and what's not. Because yes, we do have different periods, but we never are often having the conversation about what isn't a normal period in terms of what you should be doing in terms of looking out for your period to seek medical attention, right? And I really love that, because oftentimes most of the conversations we're having is, I've been having a period for 13 days, is that normal? Or I'm experiencing period cramps that are really intense, is that normal? And having that book to validate our periods is really important. But what I also really appreciate in the second section is the psychological, the validating of the period symptoms we go through. And most importantly, learning about how other people menstruate. Because often we assume that, as able-bodied people, we can be able to have access, going to the bathroom easily, using our period products easily. But we often forget people with disabilities who menstruate and what that means. We also don't need to take into consideration what it means to have ADHD, anxiety, stress, and how that impacts our period. So there's so many things psychologically that can have a great impact on our period. And I love that section 2 validates any menstruator's experience to allow them to also openly speak about these things. Also, what I think is really important in the book that we wanted to write about is what your period is like after trauma being sexual assault, miscarriage. What can you expect from that? And I think that is also very key. And then obviously the third section being the political aspect, so important in understanding what our periods mean and what access we have in terms of the rights to our period. And I think that was a really crucial chapter for me, because oftentimes we don't think we have rights when it comes to sexual and reproductive health, let alone our period. So what rights do you have as a menstruator when you are in the workplace? What can you demand to ensure that you have a period positive environment? Also, in a very beautiful chapter that Ponsel wrote was about women in prisons and how that is used as a weapon. And that was such an interesting chapter because, we often go to Constitutional Hill and we just see this underwear, but we don't know the history and context behind that. So writing that as well. Also understanding menstrual activism from when it started in the late 17th centuries till now. There's just so much you can learn about. And I think also what is important as a non-menstruator is that you're reading this to learn and understand, but also to educate yourself and to empower yourself. There's also a really great section where, for those who don't menstruate, how to support menstruators. That is really key, learning how to understand, learning how to be sensitive. So it is just, it's a wide range of things. And I think people who get this book will thoroughly enjoy engaging in it. And if you feel like you know everything about periods, I can assure you, you probably don't. You probably should read the book. And you can also just go to the index, because the index has a really long guide of different things. So if you want to focus on pain, if you want to focus on endometriosis, you can refer to those certain pages. If you want to learn about period sex, there's a chapter there. So it's a wonderful guide of the world of periods and what it means to different people. It's not only just the authors that are listed there, but there are different conversations that we spoke to and having in the book, included in the book. So yeah, I hope I did justice in trying to explain all the chapters.
And from your side, Ponso, anything that you want us to take away, from the book?
I think, Candace did a really great summary of the book, but just to say, there's so much to learn. We learn so many things. If Fina, earlier on, we're talking around the gender, knowing that menstruation is not just for women or girls. One of our contributors, Tariq Hussein, writes about that, and he's a trans man and what kind of relationship he has with his period as a trans man, and you get to learn so much. We have a great chapter for organizations, for people like you who are in influential CEO positions, Fina, on period leave. And we talked to an HR expert who tells us about what period leave, how can organizations be more inclusive and accommodating to people who menstruate by implementing period leave policies, because at this point it's not mandated by law. And so there's really, you may think that you're sitting at home, you're like, I don't need to read this book. I'm empowered in my menstruation. I don't think I don't have shame about my menstruation. But I'm telling you, even the three of us, Karen, Candace, and all our contributors, as we were writing this book, there's so much that we learned from, whether it's the physical stuff that you said is chapter 1 with Dr. Ilana Johnson, who tells us, normalizing pain. So many people who menstruate live with bad periods or irregular periods and think it's normal, and we have Dr. Ilana who says it's not normal. There's some pain, but some pain is not normal. When should you go see a gynecologist? There's so much that you can learn about mental health, as we talked about earlier on, how your period is very much linked to where you're feeling mental health wise, and how to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in the right way around that time of the month. So you may think you know everything about a period, but the reason Flow, the book about menstruation, exists is because there is so much more than we think that you could learn. So I think this book is beneficial to anyone and everyone, not just people who menstruate.
So how do people get a copy of this beautiful, wonderful, powerful book?
Well, you can get a copy of our book from most bookstores, across South Africa. The usuals like Exclusive Books, Bargain Books, and as well as online at places like loot.co.za. And I'm telling you, if the book is not in your local bookshop, you can ask them to have that book in. They can order a book, and it will be shipped to that branch. So don't go into a bookshop and they say, no, we don't have it. Say, can you please order the copy for me? And we're going to have so much more content. We understand that not everyone can buy the book. In September, we're launching Flow, the podcast about menstruation, where we expand on some of these issues quite well as well. So because we understand that not everyone has the resources to buy this book, but if you are someone who has the resources to buy this book, and you know someone who doesn't have the resources, buy that book for them. Gift it to someone who you think may need it. Gift it to your local school. If you are somebody who's finished university, what I'm doing currently now is I've taken a little bit of money, and I'll be donating books to my former high school, because I think it's really important that learners, because I remember being in those corridors and how ashamed of my period I am. And so gift it to your local library, to your local school, because it will empower others as well when it's there.
Okay, great. We will also support, and get a few copies that we can put in our clubs, because we want everybody to understand how their body works, but also the politics. I think for me, the most important thing that we need to understand is the politics around our menstruation as women. It's not only about our bodies, but there's a whole political system, that we want to dismantle in creating an enabling environment for menstruators, to have access, because it becomes a human right issue. We don't, and it should not be acceptable that in this period we still have people who use unhygienic things, tissues, newspapers, cloths that they put in there the whole day without washing or changing, because they don't have access to the products, which is what you call period poverty. We want to get rid of period poverty, and therefore we need as many people knowledgeable about why it is important to advocate for access to products. So on that note, I think we can leave it here. There is so much that we can talk about, but it's conversations which I believe should not be only here. They should be at school, in our homes, in different forums, in different platforms. And I hope you will be invited to many platforms where you can unpack, like you were alluding to how there should be period leave. You need to engage on that, engage with policymakers, how to do it, and dismantle, as I said, because we need to change. Change starts with you and I doing something about a situation. If we do nothing, it remains. So I hope whoever was listening to our conversation today, gets to understand why in South Africa, even the world across, menstruators, I nearly said women, now I remember, menstruators, should be supported. And the support that they need is for us to change policies, for us to make sure products are available. And therefore, in countries where tax is still charged, they need to advocate, that tax is removed. But moreover, we want free access. We don't want to pay anything. Like I said, we don't apply. So we don't want to pay for something we never asked for. So thank you, ladies. Any last words from your side before
Just
we
gratitude just gratitude to Soul City and to you, Fina, for this very important conversation. I think, it may it reach everyone who needs to hear this, and which is everyone.
Yeah. And again, periods are not only about women. Even fathers who are raising daughters need to understand what's happening. It's not the mother's duty to understand periods, and to be the one talking to their daughters about it. So thank you very much, ladies. I'm signing out. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.